This is BBC One in London and the South East. Now the news at 10 o'clock with Peter Sissons and Gillian Joseph.
America's 5 most wanted men, a worldwide appeal for information. A captured video raises fears they're planning further suicide attacks. Here, 2 Arabs appear in court. Anti-terrorist police make more arrests. League tables for surgeons' death rates to avoid another Bristol scandal. A summer wedding after Mr. Kennedy finally gets down on one knee.
Later on BBC London News, now it's power on the line, causing more crowding for commuters. United in London, Greek and Turkish Cypriots hope for end to divisions in their homeland.
Good evening. The United States appealed for worldwide help tonight in tracking down 5 suspected terrorists who are believed to be planning further suicide attacks. The 5 had left what appear to be martyrdom messages on videotapes recovered by American special forces in Afghanistan. At least one of the suspects had tried to enter the United States. The Attorney General, John Ashcroft, said progress was being made in combating terrorism, and the FBI added that inside Afghanistan they'd found a treasure trove of valuable information.
For the first time tonight, American officials revealed videotapes of men they regard as potential suicide bombers and highly dangerous. They've appealed to a worldwide audience to try and find these 5 individuals who they believe may be planning further attacks. The tapes amount to the last will and testament of men destined for martyrdom. One is seen cradling his AK-47. America fears these men and doesn't know where they are.
Because the statements on the tapes suggest future terrorist acts, specifically suicide attacks, we are asking for the public's assistance in further identifying and locating the individuals on the tapes so that additional investigation can be made.
The tapes were found by American special forces in the rubble of Mohammed Atif's house. He was one of Osama bin Laden's key lieutenants and was killed last November. Also from material found at Kabul, we learnt today more about the British shoe bomber Richard Reed. American officials no longer regard the man from South London as a lone maverick, but as a scout for the Al-Qaeda network, travelling the globe, identifying targets. The new information came through a piece of extraordinary luck. 2 journalists bought a computer in Kabul. What they didn't know was that it had been taken from an Al-Qaeda office.
As they fled the city, they were looted by an Afghani, who then passed them on to a Kabul computer sort of salesman in the bazaar, and we in turn bought them from this guy.
What they discovered on the hard drive was 17,000 files, some of which were encrypted. With the help of supercomputers, they broke the code. One file contained a report about a man called Abdul Rauf, now thought to be Richard Reed. Both men visited Holland, Israel, Egypt, Turkey and Pakistan in exactly the same order. The files also revealed the ease which he was able to renew his British passport. He went to the UK consulate in Amsterdam and claimed that while he was drunk, his passport had been put in a washing machine and he needed a new one. He got one and another 5 months later. A vast quantity of intelligence is now coming out of Afghanistan. Some of the Al-Qaeda prisoners are talking, but the scale of the task is enormous. Over 10,000 fighters passed through bin Laden's training camps. Western intelligence is at an early stage in identifying who they were and whether they remain a threat. Gavin Hewitt, BBC News.
For the latest on tonight's announcement, Stephen Sackur joins us from Washington. Stephen, they say progress is being made against the terrorist threat, but how much?
That is the key question. There's no doubt they do now have some real intelligence goodies discovered in Afghanistan, the videotapes, the computer hard drives, the information being given by some talkative Al-Qaeda suspects. But there is a problem. It's an obvious problem. If you just look at the 24 most wanted people on America's Al-Qaeda list, well, most of them are still at large, beginning with Osama bin Laden himself. And the problem is, Peter, that this is not real-time information the Americans are picking up. They're picking up details about operations and individuals as they stood weeks and months ago. But the key players, the big fish from al-Qaeda, are on the move, on the run. So it is very difficult for the Americans to discover where they are now, and that is the fundamental problem.
So how apprehensive are they that for all their efforts they may not be able to prevent another terrorist spectacular?
One simple, chilling word: very, very apprehensive indeed. In fact, when I spoke to Donald Rumsfeld just a couple of days ago, the Defense Secretary, he didn't say he feared or anticipated. He said he expected more terrorist attacks, big terrorist attacks on US targets. It was a chilling formulation that he put to me. I can tell you that US law enforcement agencies across this country are still on the highest state of alert. They're doing everything they can, not just to sit defensively, but to be proactive and to root out the terror groups wherever they can find them. But they know this is a global network they're fighting, and they know it is not easy.
Stephen Sackur, thank you. Here, two suspected members of the al-Qaeda network have appeared before Leicester Magistrates Court charged with terrorist offences. One of the men is accused of inciting terrorism and of directing the al-Qaeda network. Earlier, 8 other men were arrested in raids across the city, all for suspected terrorism. From Leicester, Margaret Gilmore reports.
Dozens of police were drafted in as the two were charged with belonging to Osama bin Laden's al-Qaeda organisation and with financing acts of terrorism. One was also accused of inciting an act of terrorism overseas and of directing the activities of al-Qaeda. Both had been arrested several months ago and held by the Immigration Service. Security was extremely tight as the two appeared in court behind reinforced glass screens. They spoke only once through an interpreter to confirm their names. They're due to appear again next week. Elsewhere in the city, in a separate operation, searches continue tonight at 8 addresses after a series of raids by police and anti-terrorism officers. 11 men have been arrested, 3 under immigration laws and 8 under the Terrorism Act.
There was a loud banging and commotions. Put some rubbish in the bin, looked to the left, saw a police car, turned to the right, saw a police vehicle, and a lot of police activities, a lot of movement.
This was the result of a 4-month inquiry, part of an ongoing pan-European anti-terrorist investigation involving police and intelligence agencies. Officers in Leicestershire warned there'd be increased police activity and disruption over the next couple of days. The houses are being searched for possible evidence. Those arrested are all aged between 23 and 40. They're being held at a high-security police station on the outskirts of the city. Margaret Gilmore, BBC News, Leicester.
The death rates and success rates of all heart surgeons operating in England will be freely available in 2 years' time. Responding to the inquiry report into the Bristol heart surgery scandal in which 29 children died, the Health Secretary also said that in future performance tables for all consultants and their centres will be available in all disciplines. There'll be a new complaints procedure for patients, new national standards for the care of children, and a change in the current system of medical compensation.
A small patient undergoes heart surgery in Bristol. Today, this hospital has the lowest death rate of any child heart unit in the country. But at one time, results were poor, parents were fobbed off, and children died who should have lived.
What happened here in Bristol threw a light on a hidden world. The hidden world of doctors, of the National Health Service and of the Department of Health, and it found them all wanting. Now, the government says it's creating a more open and accountable system, but few are confident that a similar tragedy couldn't be happening somewhere else in the National Health Service.
When it reported last year, the Bristol inquiry said more tragedies could only be prevented by transforming attitudes and creating a much more open system. Today, the Health Secretary agreed.
That requires a new culture of openness within the National Health Service. The days have gone when parts of the National Health Service could behave as if they were part of a secret society.
Parents of children who died in Bristol welcomed those sentiments, but having waited so long, they now want swift action.
The speed of change is never going to be quick enough, but there really needs to be some urgency, particularly amongst the way the medical profession are regulating themselves.
And this is the future. Surgeons in New York have their performance and death rates published on the internet. By 2004, patients here will be able to check on their heart surgeons. Other specialties will follow. The old grandees of the profession would have been appalled by all this. Their successors, though, welcome greater openness, albeit with reservations.
Some concern must be expressed that surgeons and units might avoid very high-risk patients because this would make the results look worse.
Yet the man who presided over the inquiry for 3 years is optimistic.
If the government response is translated into action, there'll be a sea change in the NHS. Professionals will feel able to do the job they signed up for and be reminded of their duties. Patients will feel the healthcare service is for them. And scandals like Bristol will be a thing of the past, one hopes.
The deaths of children in Bristol have already prompted significant changes. Few doubt that more change will be needed. Neil Dixon, BBC News.
We're getting reports of a bomb attack on a dance hall in central Israel. First accounts say 5 people have been killed and more than 30 others may have been wounded in the explosion at Hadera near Tel Aviv. It's thought a suicide bomber tried to detonate explosives attached to his body at the entrance to the hall, but was stopped by security guards. He then threw grenades into the building. We hope to bring you more on that later in this news. The Conservative leader Ian Duncan Smith has been setting out how he hopes to revive his party's fortunes. He said Conservatives needed to focus on the issues that make the most difference to people's lives. Andrew Marr reports.
The Tories are going back to school.